Don't! Step aside! You're blocking the flow for real passengers!
5 words that would cost Madison Pierce her career and ground every Apex Airways flight in North America. This is the story of Dr. Simone Hayes, the woman who owned the sky but was told she couldn't fly. Before we dive into this incredible true story, I want to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe everyone deserves respect regardless of how they're dressed, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Trust me, you're going to want to share this one. Now, let's go back to December 23rd. Denver International Airport Gate B47, 6:15 a.m. The perfect storm was brewing. Outside, the worst winter blizzard in a decade had turned the Rocky Mountains into a frozen wasteland. Ice coated every surface of the tarmac like nature's own prison, trapping planes and passengers alike. Inside Terminal B, the situation was pure chaos. 5,000 stranded travelers packed into a space designed for half that number. The air hung thick with the smell of stale coffee, unwashed bodies, and desperation. Gate B47 sat in the heart of this madness, but it wasn't just any gate. This was the premium departure area where Apex Airways' most expensive international flights launched into the sky. The waiting area featured leather seating, charging stations, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the frozen hell outside. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that particular shade of airport despair. PA announcements crackled constantly, flight delays, cancellations, gates changes. But none of that mattered to the woman standing behind the podium at Gate B47. Madison Pierce surveyed her domain like a queen inspecting her court. At 38, she commanded Gate B47 with an iron fist wrapped in a designer glove. Today, she wore a pristine Chanel blazer in navy blue, perfectly tailored to her slim figure. Her blonde hair was pulled into a flawless chignon, not a strand out of place despite the airport chaos. Pearl earrings caught the fluorescent light as she moved her head, scanning the crowd with calculating blue eyes. This wasn't just her job. This was her kingdom. The gate area buzzed with the particular energy of expensive travel. Business travelers in $1,000 suits checked their Rolexes impatiently. A socialite in head-to-toe designer wear held a tiny dog in a Louis Vuitton carrier. Tech executives tapped furiously on their phones, managing million-dollar deals between flights. Madison loved this crowd. They understood hierarchy. They respected authority. They looked the part. Ladies and gentlemen, Madison's voice cut through the terminal noise like a blade amplified by the gate microphone. This is a reminder that Flight 447 to London Heathrow will begin boarding momentarily. I want to remind you that this is a premium service. We will be boarding in strict order. She paused for effect, her eyes scanning the waiting area. Zone 1 passengers only when called. If you are Zone 3 or 4, please remain seated. Do not approach the podium until your zone is called. This is not a suggestion. A few tired businessmen nodded approvingly. Madison smiled. She did love an obedient audience. The ice outside wasn't just covering the planes. It was settling into the very atmosphere of Gate B47, the kind of cold that makes people cruel, that strips away the thin veneer of civilization and reveals what people really think about each other. Madison Pierce was about to show the world exactly who she was, and Dr. Simone Hayes was about to show her the price of that revelation. The clock on the departure board read 6:18 a.m. In exactly 12 minutes, Madison Pierce would make the worst mistake of her professional life. The countdown had begun. Madison Pierce had always believed that appearances told the whole story. Standing behind her podium at Gate B47, she embodied that philosophy perfectly. Her navy Chanel blazer fit like it was painted on, emphasizing her trim waist and sharp shoulders. The fabric probably cost more than most people's rent. Her pencil skirt, also Chanel, hugged her curves in all the right places, stopping precisely at her knees to show off legs that spent 3 hours a week in Pilates. Everything about Madison was calculated for maximum impact. Her makeup was flawless. Foundation that could survive a Colorado blizzard, perfectly winged eyeliner, lips painted in what she called authority red. Her blonde hair caught the harsh airport lighting and somehow made it look flattering. Even her fingernails were weapons, perfectly manicured in deep burgundy, long enough to make a point when she tapped them against her podium. But it was her eyes that really set Madison apart. Blue, like Arctic ice, they could appraise a person's net worth in 3 seconds flat. She'd spent 15 years at Gate B47, and she'd developed what she called passenger profiling into an art form. Designer luggage meant priority treatment. Expensive shoes equaled first-class service. Visible wealth demanded respect. Everything else was a problem waiting to be solved. Elena Madison called to her junior agent, her voice carrying that particular tone of authority that brooked no argument. "Make sure the priority lane stays clear. I don't want any economy passengers trying to sneak through." Elena Rodriguez, 26 and still new enough to care about treating people fairly, nodded reluctantly. She'd learned not to argue with Madison, not if she wanted to keep her job. Madison adjusted her pearl earrings, a gift from her husband, federal judge Richard Pierce. Yes, she was married to a federal judge. Yes, she made sure everyone knew it. The pearls weren't just jewelry, they were a warning. Touch me, and you're touching federal authority. She'd been head gate agent for 5 years now, ever since her promotion from the domestic gates. That promotion came after what she diplomatically called maintaining service standards during a particularly busy holiday season. What she didn't mention was how she deliberately delayed boarding for passengers who didn't fit her profile of premium travelers. Her supervisor, Lisa Hoffman, had noticed the complaints, but also noticed that Madison's gate consistently received praise from first-class passengers. Rich passengers meant good reviews. Good reviews meant corporate happiness. Corporate happiness meant promotions. The complaints about Madison's treatment of economy passengers, those seemed to get lost in paperwork. Mrs. Pierce, a nervous voice, interrupted her thoughts. A young mother with 2 crying toddlers approached the podium. The woman wore a wrinkled sweater and jeans that had seen better days. "I know you haven't called my zone yet, but my baby needs his medicine, and it's in my carry-on bag. Could I just grab it really quickly?" Madison's Arctic eyes narrowed. Here was exactly the kind of disruption she wouldn't tolerate. "Ma'am," she said, her voice dropping to that special register she reserved for people she considered beneath her notice. "Your zone will be called when it's time. Return to your seat and wait. Rules exist for a reason. But my baby, rules." Madison repeated each word sharp enough to cut glass, exist for a reason. The young mother's face crumpled, but she backed away. Madison felt that familiar rush of satisfaction. Order maintained, authority respected, hierarchy preserved. She turned back to her computer screen where the passenger manifest for Flight 447 glowed in neat, organized rows. Zone 1 was the cream of the crop. Executives, doctors, tech moguls, old money families. People who understood the natural order of things. Zone 3 and 4. Those were the problems. The people who tried to board early, who argued about carry-on restrictions, who acted like rules, didn't apply to them just because they'd bought a ticket. Madison's job was to remind them otherwise. She glanced at her Cartier watch, another gift from her husband, another symbol of her place in the world. 6:22 a.m. Time to begin boarding. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced, her voice carrying across the gate area like a royal decree. We will now begin boarding Flight 447 to London Heathrow. Zone 1, passengers only. I repeat, Zone 1, passengers only. She watched as the appropriate passengers rose from their leather seats. A tech executive in a $5,000 suit. A socialite whose handbag cost more than a car. An elderly businessman whose shoes alone probably cost more than Elena's monthly salary. These were her people. These were the passengers who deserved her respect. Madison Pierce had built her entire career on the belief that respect was something you earned through wealth, status, and appearance. She'd never considered that respect might be something every human being deserved, simply by virtue of being human. She was about to learn that lesson in the most public, most humiliating way possible. The lesson would begin when a tired woman in a Howard University sweatshirt approached her podium, carrying nothing but a worn messenger bag and the weight of a brother's life on her shoulders. Madison Pierce thought she knew exactly what kind of passenger doctor Simone Hayes was. She was about to discover she'd never been more wrong about anything in her life. Dr. Simone Hayes looked like she'd been hit by a truck, dragged through a hurricane, and left to dry in a hospital waiting room, which, considering the last 42 hours of her life, wasn't far from the truth. She walked through the automatic doors of Terminal B like someone moving underwater. Every step deliberate but exhausted, every breath a conscious effort. Her Howard University sweatshirt had seen better decades. The once proud navy blue had faded to a tired gray, and the university logo was cracked and peeling. Her jeans were ripped at the knees, not from fashion but from genuine wear. Her Nike sneakers squeaked against the polished airport floor, the soles worn thin from years of 16-hour days in research labs and hospital corridors. But if you looked past the exhaustion, past the worn clothes and the messy ponytail, you might notice something else. The way she moved with the unconscious authority. The way her eyes, bloodshot from sleeplessness, still held the sharp intelligence of someone accustomed to making life and death decisions. The way she carried herself like someone who'd built an empire from nothing and wasn't about to apologize for it. Doctor. Simone Hayes was worth approximately $847 million, but she looked like she was worth about $47, and that disconnect was about to create a problem of epic proportions. Her messenger bag, a beat-up leather thing she'd carried since medical school, hung heavy on her shoulder. Inside weren't the usual travel documents and comfort items. Instead, it was packed with medical records, surgical consent forms, blood-type certificates, and a folder thick with emergency contact numbers for kidney transplant coordinators across 3 countries. Simone's phone buzzed constantly. Texts from her company's board of directors, calls from Hayes Medical Technologies' crisis management team, emails from the British surgical team waiting for her arrival. She ignored them all. Nothing mattered right now except getting to London. Nothing mattered except saving David's life. David Hayes, 29, her younger brother and business partner. The brilliant programmer who'd helped her build Hayes Medical Technologies from a dorm room experiment into a billion-dollar medical innovation company. The same David who'd collapsed in their London office 3 days ago, his kidneys finally giving up after years of genetic disease they'd both hoped to outrun. Simone had been in Denver presenting their latest remote surgery technology to the American Medical Association when the call came. Dr. James Cooper, the British surgeon, his voice carefully controlled. "Dr. Hayes, your brother's condition has deteriorated rapidly. We need to schedule emergency transplant surgery within 48 hours, or we're looking at complete renal failure." The math was simple and brutal. David had type O negative blood and a rare genetic marker that made finding a donor nearly impossible. Nearly impossible except for the fact that Simone was his identical genetic match. They'd tested years ago when David first showed symptoms. She was his only chance. 48 hours. From Denver to London. Through the worst winter storm the Rocky Mountains had seen in a decade. On the last available flight that would get her to London in time for the surgery window. Flight 447, Gate B47. Seat 1A. She'd bought the first-class ticket not for luxury but for speed. First-class passengers boarded first, got through customs faster, received priority treatment. When your brother's life hung in the balance, $12,000 for a plane seat wasn't an expense. It was an investment in survival. Simone pulled out her phone and checked the time. 6:24 a.m. The flight was scheduled to board at 6:30. She was cutting it close, but she'd make it. She'd calculated every variable, accounted for every possible delay. What she hadn't accounted for was human prejudice. As she approached Gate B47, Simone caught sight of herself in a reflection from the massive windows overlooking the tarmac. She looked exactly like what she was. A woman who'd spent the last 42 hours coordinating international medical logistics, arranging surgical teams, and fighting with insurance companies. A woman who'd thrown on the first clothes she could find and raced to the airport with nothing but her brother's life on her mind. She looked like someone who definitely didn't belong in first class. But appearances, as Madison Pierce was about to learn, could be devastatingly deceiving. Hidden in Simone's worn messenger bag underneath the medical documents and emergency contact forms was a folder marked Apex Airways Investment Portfolio. Inside that folder were documents showing her 31% ownership stake in Apex Airways, an investment she'd made 5 years ago when the airline was struggling financially and needed capital injection. That investment had saved the airline from bankruptcy. It had also made Simone Hayes one of the most powerful people in commercial aviation. She just didn't look like it. Simone approached the boarding area, her eyes scanning for gate B47. The place was packed with the usual mix of international travelers. Business executives checking their phones, families managing restless children, elderly passengers settling in for a long wait. And there, behind the gate podium like a general commanding troops, stood Madison Pierce. Simone had no way of knowing that Madison had spent the morning exercising what she considered quality control over her passengers. She didn't know about the young mother who'd been denied access to her baby's medicine. She couldn't see the pattern of discrimination that had been building at gate B47 for years. All Simone knew was that she needed to get on that plane. Her brother's life depended on it. She reached into her messenger bag, fumbling through medical documents to find her boarding pass. The paper was wrinkled from being stuffed between surgical consent forms and blood test results. It looked exactly like what it was, a hastily purchased ticket by someone dealing with a medical emergency. It looked suspicious, and Madison Pierce had built her entire career on being suspicious of passengers who didn't fit her narrow definition of acceptable. As Simone approached the podium boarding pass in hand, she had no idea she was about to trigger a confrontation that would expose years of discrimination, cost careers, transform an industry, and ultimately save more than just her brother's life. She just knew she needed to get on that plane. The clock on the departure board ticked over to 6:25 a.m. 5 minutes until boarding. 5 minutes until everything changed. Zone 1, passengers only. I repeat, Zone 1, passengers only. Madison Pierce's voice cut through the terminal chaos with practiced authority. She stood behind her podium like a fortress commander surveying the waiting area for any signs of disorder. Her perfectly manicured fingers hovered over her computer keyboard, ready to scan the boarding passes of passengers who met her exacting standards. From the leather seating area, the appropriate travelers began to rise. Michael Sterling, a tech executive whose Armani suit probably cost more than most people's cars, approached first. His carry-on was understated but expensive. Italian leather that whispered rather than shouted wealth. Mr. Sterling Madison's voice warmed instantly. "Wonderful to see you again. Seat 2B. I believe the crew has your usual single malt waiting. Thank you, Madison. Always a pleasure flying with professionals who understand service." He smiled, and Madison felt that familiar glow of validation. This was how it was supposed to work. Mutual respect between people who understood their proper place in the world's hierarchy. Behind Sterling came the socialite with the designer dog carrier, then an elderly businessman whose custom shoes gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Each passenger received Madison's full attention. Warm smiles, personalized service, the kind of treatment that made first-class passengers feel special. And then Simone Hayes approached the podium. Madison's trained eye cataloged the problems immediately. The faded sweatshirt that belonged at a laundromat not in first class, the ripped jeans that screamed college student or worse, the beat-up sneakers that had clearly seen better years, the messy ponytail that suggested someone who couldn't be bothered with basic grooming standards. Most telling of all was the way she moved, hesitant, distracted, fumbling through a worn messenger bag like she wasn't sure what she was looking for. This was exactly the kind of passenger who tried to game the system, who showed up with printed boarding passes from discount websites hoping to slip through in the confusion. Not on Madison's watch. "Ma'am." Madison's voice dropped to that patronizing register she reserved for problem passengers. Her Arctic blue eyes fixed on Simone with laser focus. "Economy boarding isn't for another hour. Zone 1 is for premium passengers only. You'll need to return to the waiting area. Simona looked up from her bag boarding pass, half extracted from between medical documents. Her eyes were rimmed with red dark circles carved deep beneath them from 42 hours without sleep. But her voice when she spoke carried a quiet authority that should have given Madison pause. I am Zone 1. Seat 1A. Medical emergency. The words hung in the air for a moment. Madison blinked, processing this information with the efficiency of someone who'd heard every excuse in the book. Then she laughed. It wasn't a warm laugh or even an amused one. It was the sharp, cutting sound of someone who'd caught an obvious lie and enjoyed exposing it. The laugh carried across the gate area, drawing attention from other passengers. Sweetie Madison said, her voice loud enough for nearby travelers to hear, Seat 1A is our premier first-class suite. It costs $12,000. Now, I don't know if you're confused about your booking or if you're trying to pull a fast one, but I need you to step aside. You're blocking the flow for the actual premium passengers. Michael Sterling, still waiting to board, glanced over with curiosity. Ashley Brooks, a 19-year-old college student with a travel blog, looked up from her phone where she'd been documenting her own travel experience. Elena Rodriguez, the junior gate agent, shifted uncomfortably behind Madison. Simone finally extracted her boarding pass from the chaos in her bag. The paper was wrinkled creased from being stuffed between urgent medical documents. It looked exactly like what it was, a ticket purchased in crisis by someone focused on life and death priorities rather than aesthetic presentation. I have my boarding pass right here, Simone said, extending the crumpled paper toward Madison. First class, Seat 1A, purchased 3 hours ago? Madison didn't even look at the document. Instead, she made a show of leaning back from the podium as if the very sight of the wrinkled paper might be contagious. I'm not scanning some crumpled piece of paper that looks like it came out of a printer at a Kinko's Madison, announced her voice carrying clearly to the assembled passengers. We have security protocols for a reason. Step aside now, or I'll call airport security to escort you away from the gate. A murmur ran through the waiting area. Some passengers looked uncomfortable with Madison's tone, but others nodded approvingly. They'd paid premium prices for premium service, and part of that service was keeping the riffraff away. Simone's exhausted mind tried to process what was happening. She'd anticipated flight delays, weather problems, medical complications. She'd planned for every reasonable obstacle between her and her brother's surgery. What she hadn't planned for was being denied boarding because of how she looked. You haven't even checked my name, Simone said, her voice gaining a fraction of steel despite her exhaustion. My name is Dr. Simone Hayes. If you check your manifest. I don't need to check any manifest to know you don't fit the profile, Dr. Madison interrupted, putting sarcastic emphasis around Simone's title. We have appearance standards for first class. We have policies about appropriate attire. And right now you are loitering in a priority boarding area. The temperature in the gate area seemed to drop several degrees. Ashley Brooks, sensing something significant happening, quietly started recording on her phone. She'd originally planned to document her own travel experience for her Instagram followers, but this was becoming something bigger. Elena Rodriguez felt her stomach clench. She'd seen Madison handle problem passengers before, but this felt different. More personal, more cruel. Ma'am, Elena said quietly, stepping forward. Maybe we could just scan her boarding pass to verify. Elena Madison snapped, not taking her eyes off Simone. I'll handle this. Return to your duties. The junior agent stepped back, but her discomfort was visible to anyone paying attention. Michael Sterling checked his Rolex and cleared his throat. Come on, lady, he said to Simone, though his tone was more uncomfortable than angry. The line's backing up. If there's a problem with your ticket, you should sort it out with customer service. Simone looked at Madison. She looked at the growing line of passengers behind her. She felt the weight of every minute ticking away, bringing her closer to missing the surgery window that would save her brother's life. She took a deep breath, the kind of breath someone takes before diving into deep, dark water. I am asking you one last time, Simone said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm whisper that somehow carried more authority than Madison's loudest announcements. Scan the pass, read the name, do your job. The gate area went quiet. Even the constant background noise of the airport seemed to fade as passengers unconsciously leaned in to hear what would happen next. Madison's face flushed red. In 15 years of gate management, no one, especially no one who looked like this, had dared to tell her how to do her job. The audacity was breathtaking. The disrespect was intolerable. And I'm telling you, Madison snapped, her voice rising to near shouting level, to get out of my line before I ban you from this airline for life. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger toward the plastic chairs against the far wall. Sit there. Wait until every other passenger has boarded. If there's space left over near the toilets, maybe I'll let you on. Maybe. The gate area erupted in uncomfortable murmurs. Ashley Brooks's hands trembled slightly as she recorded, realizing she was documenting something that could change everything. Elena Rodriguez looked like she might be sick. Michael Sterling took a step back, suddenly uncomfortable with his earlier support of Madison's position, and Simone Hayes stood frozen for exactly 1 second, feeling the full weight of humiliation wash over her like ice water. Then something else clicked into place. Not anger. Anger would have been unprofessional. Not rage. Rage would have been unproductive. Instead, the gears of a machine much larger than Madison Pierce began to turn. Simone Hayes had been humiliated before. As one of only 12 black women in her medical school class, she'd endured professors who questioned her qualifications, and classmates who assumed she was there because of affirmative action, rather than her 4.0 GPA and perfect MCAT scores. As a young entrepreneur seeking venture capital, she'd sat through meetings where investors asked if she had a real CEO they could speak with instead. But this was different. This was being denied basic human dignity in front of 50 strangers because of her appearance. This was being told she didn't belong in a seat she'd purchased on an airline she partially owned while racing to save her brother's life. The humiliation burned hot and prickling against her skin. "Okay," Simone said quietly, picking up her messenger bag. "I'll step aside." Madison Pierce smiled triumphantly. Another crisis averted, another disruption eliminated. She turned back to her computer, ready to resume proper boarding procedures with appropriate passengers. But as Simone walked toward the plastic chairs Madison had indicated, Ashley Brooks made a decision that would change everything. "Excuse me," the 19-year-old called out, her phone still recording. "What just happened here?" Madison looked over with irritation. Another disruption from another inappropriate passenger. A security situation was handled according to protocol. "Please return to your seat." Security situation. Ashley's voice carried clearly across the gate area. "She had a boarding pass. You didn't even look at it. Young lady, this is none of your business." But Ashley Brooks was part of a generation that had grown up documenting everything, sharing everything, believing that sunshine was the best disinfectant for injustice. Her Instagram account had 50,000 followers who tuned in for her travel content, but this was bigger than travel tips and airport food reviews. "This is everyone's business," Ashley said, her phone camera capturing Madison's increasingly flustered expression. "You just racially profiled someone right here in front of all of us. I did no such thing." Madison's voice rose to a near shriek. "I followed protocol. We have appearance standards. Appearance standards." An elderly woman in Zone 2 stood up. "That young lady is better dressed than half the people I see in first class these days." "She was polite," added Michael Sterling, his earlier support of Madison evaporating. "More polite than you're being right now." Elena Rodriguez watched the situation spiral out of control. She'd seen Madison handle difficult passengers before, but never like this. Never with this level of cruelty, this obvious bias. Her hands shook as she realized she was witnessing something that could destroy careers. Madison, sensing the crowd turning against her, doubled down. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced over the gate microphone, her voice now carrying to the entire terminal area, "we are experiencing a security delay, due to an unverified passenger attempting to board with questionable documentation. Please bear with us as we maintain our safety standards. The announcement was meant to justify her position to rally support from passengers who valued security over civil rights. Instead, it had the opposite effect: questionable documentation. Ashley's voice was incredulous. She showed you a boarding pass and you wouldn't even look at it. "This is insane," muttered a businessman waiting in Zone 2. "Just scan the damn ticket. I've seen actual security issues," said a woman who identified herself as a federal air marshal. "This isn't one of them." But Madison Pierce had built her entire career on the belief that authority, once asserted, could never be questioned. To back down now would be to admit that her judgment was flawed, that her appearance-based passenger profiling was discriminatory, that she'd been wrong. Madison Pierce had never been wrong about a passenger in 15 years. She wasn't about to start admitting mistakes now. "The passenger will remain seated until all legitimate travelers have boarded," Madison announced firmly. "Airport security has been notified of the disruption." She said it loud enough for Simone to hear from the plastic chairs, where she now sat phone in hand, making a call that Madison assumed was to family or friends, to complain about the treatment she'd received. Madison had no way of knowing that Simone's phone contained a direct line to the CEO of Apex Airways. She had no way of knowing that Roberto. Apex in Simone's contact list wasn't a customer service representative, but Roberto Martinez, the man who ran the entire airline. She had no way of knowing that Simone's questionable documentation included ownership papers for 31% of the company Madison worked for. But she was about to find out. As boarding continued with the remaining Zone 1 passengers, Madison felt a familiar satisfaction. Order had been restored. Standards had been maintained. The appropriate passengers were receiving appropriate service while the problem passenger waited quietly in timeout like a scolded child. Ashley Brooks continued recording her video, now approaching 10,000 views as she live-streamed to her Instagram followers. Comments poured in faster than she could read them. "This is discrimination 100%. Someone needs to report this gate agent. That poor woman just wanted to board her flight. This is why I hate flying, Elena." Rodriguez tried to focus on her duties, but her hands shook as she processed boarding passes. She'd grown up hearing stories from her grandmother about discrimination, about being treated as less than because of how you looked or where you came from. She'd thought those days were mostly behind them. Watching Madison humiliate Dr. Hayes made her realize how naive she'd been. Michael Sterling boarded the plane with a sick feeling in his stomach. He'd supported Madison's initial response because expensive flights did attract scammers sometimes. But watching the situation unfold, seeing the cruelty in Madison's treatment of a woman who'd done nothing wrong, made him question his own biases. The Zone 2 passengers began boarding, many of them glancing toward the plastic chairs where Simone sat quietly talking on her phone. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked relieved that the disruption had been handled. None of them realized they were witnessing the calm before a hurricane. As Simone spoke quietly into her phone, her voice steady, despite her exhaustion, Madison Pierce continued boarding passengers with the satisfaction of someone who'd successfully defended her territory. Zone 2, now boarding Zone 2. Madison announced, her voice back to its usual professional tone. "Thank you for your patience during our brief security delay." Security delay. That's how she'd chosen to frame the deliberate humiliation of a paying passenger. It was a choice she'd regret for the rest of her life. Because at that exact moment, Simone Hayes was explaining to Roberto Martinez, CEO of Apex Airways, exactly what had just happened at Gate B47. And Roberto Martinez was realizing that his airline's largest shareholder had just been the victim of the kind of discrimination that could destroy companies overnight. The clock on the departure board read 6:47 a.m. In 3 minutes, Madison Pierce's world would begin to collapse. Simone Hayes sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair, her worn messenger bag at her feet, and dialed a number she'd hoped never to use in a situation like this. "Roberto," she said. When the familiar voice answered on the second ring, It's Simone. We have a situation at Gate B47, 300 miles away in his corner office at Apex Airways headquarters in Phoenix. Roberto Martinez felt his blood pressure spike. Dr. Simone Hayes didn't call him for small problems. When the woman who'd saved his airline from bankruptcy used the word situation, it usually meant something that required immediate executive attention. Simone, what's happening? Are you okay? Your gate agent has just prevented your largest shareholder from boarding a flight to save her brother's life, Simone said quietly, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. She refused to scan my boarding pass, accused me of fraud, threatened to call security, and publicly humiliated me in front of 50 passengers. Roberto Martinez had been CEO of Apex Airways for 7 years. He'd handled terrorist threats, mechanical failures, pilot strikes, and natural disasters. But in all that time, nothing had made his stomach drop, quite like those 28 words. Dr. Simone Hayes owned 31% of his airline. More importantly, she was one of the most respected medical innovators in the world, a woman whose reputation was absolutely spotless. If she said discrimination had occurred, discrimination had occurred. Tell me exactly what happened, Roberto said, already pulling up the gate surveillance feeds on his computer. As Simone recounted the events in her calm, clinical voice, the refusal to examine her boarding pass, Madison's loud announcements about security concerns, the public humiliation in front of the entire gate area, Roberto watched the scene unfold in real time on his security monitors. What he saw made him physically sick. Madison Pierce, whom he'd met personally during corporate visits, standing behind her podium like a queen dispensing judgment. Dr. Simone Hayes, one of the most brilliant minds in modern medicine, being treated like a criminal because she was wearing a college sweatshirt. Roberto Simone continued, I need to be on this flight. David's surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning. The kidney has to come from a living donor, and I'm the only match. Every minute I'm delayed puts his life at risk. Roberto Martinez had built his career on making quick decisions under pressure. This decision took him approximately 3 seconds. Simone, stay on the line. I'm about to fix this permanently. His fingers flew across his keyboard, accessing Apex Airways' emergency management system. The same system designed for terrorist threats and natural disasters was about to be deployed against discrimination. I'm pulling up your booking now. Roberto continued speaking quickly. First class seat 1. I purchased at 3:47 a.m. this morning with your corporate American Express Black Card. $12,347. Your frequent flyer number shows 847,000 lifetime miles with us. Each fact hit like a hammer blow. This wasn't a scammer or a confused passenger. This was exactly who she said she was. I'm also seeing, Roberto continued, his voice getting dangerously quiet, that Madison Pierce has had 17 formal complaints filed against her in the past 18 months, all involving passengers of color, all marked as resolved without merit by her supervisor. Simone closed her eyes briefly. The pattern was exactly what she'd suspected. Roberto, I don't want revenge. I want accountability. And I want to get on this plane to save my brother's life. You'll get both, Roberto promised. I'm activating Code Black protocol. Every department head is being notified. Legal, HR, public relations, federal compliance. Everyone is now monitoring this situation in real time. Code Black was Apex Airways' most serious internal threat level. It was reserved for events that could destroy the company's reputation overnight. Roberto Martinez had just classified the discrimination of Dr. Simone Hayes as a company-threatening emergency. I'm also, Roberto continued, personally calling Gate B47 right now. Madison Pierce is about to learn who you really are. And Roberto Simone's voice carried a note of steel that reminded him exactly why she'd been successful enough to save his airline. I want every single person who enabled this to face consequences. Not just Madison. Everyone who knew and did nothing. Roberto Martinez looked at his screen, where 17 complaint reports sat buried in administrative files. 17 times passengers had been discriminated against. 17 times the complaints had been dismissed without investigation. The woman who'd saved his airline from bankruptcy was right to be furious. Simone, you have my word. This ends today. As he reached for his desk phone to call gate B47 directly, Roberto Martinez realized he was about to trigger the most comprehensive discrimination investigation in airline industry history. The dominoes were about to fall, and when they finished falling, Apex Airways would either be a better company or a destroyed one. There was no middle ground. At gate B47, Madison Pierce continued boarding Zone 2 passengers, completely unaware that her phone was about to ring with a call that would end her career in aviation forever. The clock read 6:49 a.m. The reckoning had begun. Madison Pierce was in her element. Zone 2 passengers streamed past her podium in orderly fashion, each boarding pass scanned with professional efficiency. The earlier disruption had been handled appropriately, and normal operations had resumed. She felt the familiar satisfaction of a job well done, standards maintained, proper hierarchy preserved. That's when her computer screen flickered. At first, it was just a brief flash of yellow, probably a minor system glitch. The airport's computer network was notoriously buggy during heavy weather. Madison continued scanning boarding passes, her perfectly manicured fingers moving with practiced efficiency. Then the yellow flash became a yellow box. Then the yellow box became a warning message that made Madison's blood freeze in her veins. System alert, passenger discrepancy detected, high priority, corporate review, initiated contact management immediately. Madison stared at the screen, her mouth suddenly dry. In 15 years of gate management, she'd never seen a warning like this. She clicked the dismiss button frantically, but the message wouldn't disappear. Instead, it grew larger, more insistent. Critical review boarding denial, passenger Dr. Simone Hayes, executive override required. Do not proceed with boarding Dr. Simone Hayes. The woman in the Howard University sweatshirt. The woman Madison had just banished to the plastic chairs for having inappropriate documentation. How did the computer system know about her? Elena Rodriguez noticed Madison's sudden pallor. Mrs. Pierce, is everything okay? Madison ignored her, frantically clicking through computer screens trying to access passenger information. But every screen she opened led back to the same warning message. The system wasn't just flagging Dr. Hayes as a problem, it was treating her like some kind of VIP emergency. That's when Madison's desk phone rang. The direct line that only upper management used for emergencies. Madison's hand shook slightly as she picked up the receiver. Gate B47, this is Madison Pierce. Madison, this is Roberto Martinez, CEO of Apex Airways. The world tilted on its axis. The CEO, the actual CEO, was calling her gate. In 15 years, Madison had never spoken directly to anyone above regional management. CEOs didn't call gates unless something catastrophic had happened. Mr. Martinez, she stammered, how can I help you? You can start by explaining why you denied boarding to Dr. Simone Hayes. Madison's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. How did the CEO know about that passenger? How did he know her name? How did this reach corporate headquarters so quickly? Sir, I had security concerns about a passenger with questionable documentation. Standard protocol was followed. Standard protocol. Roberto's voice was dangerously quiet. Let me read you Dr. Hayes's passenger profile. Zone 1, First Class, Seat 1A. Purchased with a corporate American Express black card at 3:47 a.m. this morning for $12,347. Lifetime frequent flyer with 847,000 miles. Apex Airways shareholder. Tell me, Madison, which part of that profile raised security concerns? Each word hit Madison like a physical blow. Shareholder, corporate American Express black card, 847,000 lifetime miles. The homeless-looking woman in the sweatshirt was a shareholder in the airline. Sir, she didn't look. Her appearance was what Madison, the gate area, had gone completely quiet. Passengers still waiting to board sensed something significant happening. Ashley Brooks continued filming her live stream, now approaching 25,000 viewers, as word spread across social media that something major was unfolding at Denver International Airport. Elena Rodriguez watched Madison's face cycle through confusion, horror, and dawning realization. Whatever was happening on that phone call, it was catastrophic. Sir Madison tried again. She had a wrinkled boarding pass and was dressed inappropriately for first class. We have appearance standards. We have no such standards. Roberto's voice cut through the phone line like a blade. What we have, Madison, are federal anti-discrimination laws that you just violated in the most public way possible. Madison's legs felt weak. She gripped the podium for support, her perfectly applied makeup beginning to streak as sweat beaded on her forehead. Dr. Hayes Roberto continued is currently sitting in plastic chairs while you board other passengers. Dr. Hayes, who owns 31% of this airline. Dr. Hayes, who is racing to London to donate a kidney to save her brother's life. Dr. Hayes, whose treatment at your gate is currently being live-streamed to thousands of people who are watching Apex Airways discriminate against one of the most respected medical professionals in the world. The phone went silent for a moment, and Madison could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. "Do you understand the magnitude of what you've done?" Roberto asked quietly. Madison looked across the gate area to where Simone still sat phone to her ear, speaking quietly. Other passengers were staring now, putting together pieces of the conversation they could overhear. Ashley Brooks had moved closer, her phone camera capturing Madison's growing panic. "I was following procedures," Madison whispered, her voice barely audible. "No, Madison, you were following your own prejudices. And those prejudices have just created a crisis that threatens this entire airline." Madison's computer screen flashed again, this time with a new message. "Emergency protocol activated all Apex Airways flights. Ground stop initiated pending discrimination review." The words blurred in front of Madison's eyes. Ground stop. Every Apex Airways flight in the country was being stopped because of her actions. "Sir," she whispered into the phone, "what do you want me to do?" First, Roberto said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who controlled a billion-dollar company, "You're going to personally apologize to Dr. Hayes. Then you're going to board her immediately with full first-class priority. Then you're going to wait for the crisis management team that's already en route to your gate. Crisis Management Madison. In the last 10 minutes, your treatment of Dr. Hayes has been viewed by 30,000 people on social media. #Apex Discrimination is trending on Twitter. CNN just called our media relations department. The Department of Transportation has opened an inquiry. You didn't just deny boarding to a passenger. You created a federal case." The phone line went dead. Madison stood frozen behind her podium, the receiver still in her hand, staring at a computer screen that showed her entire world collapsing in real time. Around her, the gate area buzzed with whispered conversations as passengers tried to understand what they'd just witnessed. Elena Rodriguez stepped forward tentatively. "Mrs. Pierce, what do we do now?" Madison looked at her junior agent, then at the passengers still waiting to board, then at the plastic chairs where Dr. Simone Hayes sat quietly, still speaking on her phone to the CEO who had just demolished Madison's career. For the first time in 15 years of gate management, Madison Pierce had absolutely no idea what to do. The woman she dismissed as inappropriate, unworthy, suspicious, that woman owned nearly a third of the airline Madison worked for. The woman she'd humiliated for wearing a college sweatshirt was one of the most powerful people in commercial aviation. The woman she'd treated like a criminal was about to teach her that discrimination has consequences. And those consequences were just beginning. What happened next at Gate B47 would be replayed millions of times across social media, analyzed by discrimination lawyers, and studied in business schools as a case study in how quickly prejudice can destroy a career. Madison Pierce approached the plastic chairs where Dr. Simone Hayes sat, her perfect composure cracking with each step. Behind her, Elena Rodriguez followed reluctantly, dreading what was about to unfold. "Dr. Hayes Madison," began, her voice barely above a whisper, there seems to have been a misunderstanding." Simone looked up from her phone call, eyebrows raised slightly. "A misunderstanding about your boarding pass and your seat assignment." The gate area had gone completely silent. Passengers sensed they were witnessing something significant, something that would be talked about long after they reached their destinations. Ashley Brooks moved closer with her phone. her live stream now approaching 50,000 viewers as the story spread across social platforms. There was no misunderstanding, Simone said quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the hushed space. You refused to scan my boarding pass. You accused me of fraud. You threatened to call security. You announced over the PA system that I was a security risk. Which part of that was a misunderstanding? Madison's carefully applied makeup was beginning to streak. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the terminal's air conditioning. I was following security procedures. You were following your prejudices, Simone interrupted, rising from the plastic chair with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to command. And now you're following damage control instructions from your CEO. The crowd of passengers pressed closer. Michael Sterling, who had earlier supported Madison's actions, now looked sick to his stomach. The elderly businessman who'd praised appearance standards suddenly found his expensive shoes very interesting. Dr. Hayes Madison, tried again. If you could just return to the podium, we can get you boarded immediately. No. The single word hit like a gunshot. Simone Hayes stood in the center of the gate area surrounded by passengers and airport staff, her Howard University sweatshirt and ripped jeans marking her as an unlikely center of power. I won't return to your podium to be processed like cargo, Simone continued, not after what you've done. Not after how you've treated me. Elena Rodriguez felt tears starting to form. She'd watched Madison humiliate passengers before, but never like this. Never with such obvious cruelty, such clear discrimination. Ma'am, Elena said quietly. Stepping forward, I want to apologize. I should have spoken up. I should have. You were afraid for your job, Simone said gently, her tone completely different when addressing the junior agent. I understand that fear, but your boss here wasn't afraid. She was exercising power. Madison's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at the screen. Roberto Martinez, calling back. Her hand trembled as she answered. Put me on speaker, Roberto's voice commanded through the phone. Now. Madison's fingers fumbled with the speaker button. Roberto Martinez's voice filled the gate area, reaching every passenger, every employee, every person who had witnessed the discrimination. Ladies and gentlemen, Roberto's voice carried the authority of absolute corporate power. This is Roberto Martinez, Chief Executive Officer of Apex Airways. I want to address what has happened at this gate today. The terminal seemed to hold its breath. Dr. Simone Hayes is one of the most respected medical professionals in the world. She has revolutionized remote surgery techniques that save lives across the globe. She is also one of the primary shareholders of Apex Airways, owning 31% of this company. Gasps echoed through the gate area. Michael Sterling actually staggered backward. Ashley Brooks' live stream exploded with comments as viewers realized they were watching the discrimination of a major airline shareholder. More importantly, Roberto continued. Dr. Hayes is currently racing to London to donate her kidney to save her brother's life. She purchased a $12,000 first-class ticket because every minute matters in her fight to save a human being. Madison Pierce had gone completely pale. She gripped her podium for support as the full magnitude of her actions crashed over her. Instead of receiving the priority service that any passenger deserves, Dr. Hayes was subjected to discrimination, humiliation, and threats. She was treated as suspicious because of her appearance. She was denied basic human dignity because she didn't look like what my gate agent thought a first-class passenger should look like. The silence in the gate area was deafening. This is not who Apex Airways is. This is not what we stand for. And this ends today. Roberto paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of absolute judgment. Madison Pierce, your employment with Apex Airways is terminated immediately. Your supervisor, Lisa Hoffman, who buried 17 discrimination complaints against you, is also terminated. Security will escort you from the premises. Madison's legs gave out. She slumped against her podium, the reality hitting her like a physical blow. Fired. Publicly, humiliatingly fired in front of 50 passengers and thousands of online viewers. Dr. Hayes Roberto continued, his voice softening on behalf of Apex Airways. I offer you my deepest apologies. What happened here today is inexcusable. We have failed you, and we have failed the values we claim to represent." Simone nodded slightly, acknowledging the apology without accepting it as sufficient. "Elena Rodriguez." Roberto's voice called out, "Step forward." The junior agent moved hesitantly into the center of the gate area, her face flushed with embarrassment and fear. "Elena, you are hereby promoted to senior gate agent. You will receive immediate bias training and will lead our new discrimination prevention program. Your first assignment is to ensure Dr. Hayes receives the priority boarding and service she should have received from the beginning." Elena's mouth fell open. Promoted. From junior agent to senior position in a matter of minutes because she'd been the only staff member to show basic human decency. As for everyone else, Roberto's voice filled the terminal. "What you've witnessed today is unacceptable, but it's also an opportunity to demand better, an opportunity to refuse to tolerate discrimination wherever you encounter it." Ashley Brooks, still filming, realized she was documenting a corporate reckoning in real time. Her live stream had reached 100,000 viewers, and the numbers kept climbing. Dr. Hayes Roberto concluded your flight will be held as long as necessary. You will board with full priority, and when you return from saving your brother's life, I hope you'll allow us the opportunity to earn back your trust. The phone line went dead. Madison Pierce stood behind her podium, no longer a gate agent, but a former employee facing public humiliation and career destruction. Airport security was already approaching, called by Roberto to escort her from the premises. Elena Rodriguez approached Simone tentatively. "Dr. Hayes, whenever you're ready, we can begin priority boarding." Simone looked around the gate area, at the passengers who had witnessed her humiliation, at Ashley Brooks, whose phone had documented everything, at Madison Pierce, whose prejudices had finally met their consequences. "Before I board," Simone said, her voice carrying to every corner of the gate area, "I want to say something to everyone here." The terminal fell silent again. What you witnessed today happens every day in airports and hotels and stores across this country. The only difference is that this time the person being discriminated against happened to own part of the airline. Most victims don't have that power. She paused, looking directly at the camera phone that was broadcasting to thousands. But every victim deserves the same response you've seen here today. Every person deserves dignity. Every human being deserves respect. Not because of what they own or what they're worth, but because they're human. Applause started slowly. First from Elena Rodriguez, then from a few passengers, then building to fill the entire gate area. It wasn't the thunderous applause of a concert or sports event. It was something deeper. The sound of people recognizing truth, justice, and basic human decency. Madison Pierce was led away by security, her perfect appearance finally matching her broken career. She didn't look back. Dr. Simone Hayes walked to the boarding gate where Elena Rodriguez waited with a smile and the respect that should have been shown from the beginning. But the consequences of what happened at gate B47 were just beginning to unfold. While Dr. Simone Hayes finally boarded Flight 447 to save her brother's life, the discrimination she'd endured triggered a corporate crisis response unprecedented in airline industry history. In Apex Airways' headquarters in Phoenix, Roberto Martinez had assembled every department head in the company's main conference room. The massive table was surrounded by legal counsel, human resources directors, public relations executives, federal compliance officers, and technology specialists. Wall-mounted screens displayed real-time social media feeds, news broadcasts, and federal inquiry notifications. "Ladies and gentlemen," Roberto began, his voice tight with controlled fury, "we have a code black situation that threatens the existence of this company." Sarah Walsh, Chief Legal Officer, spoke first. "Roberto, I've pulled Madison Pierce's complete employment file. This is worse than we thought. 17 formal discrimination complaints in 18 months, all involving passengers of color. All marked resolved without merit by her supervisor, Lisa Hoffman. 17, Roberto repeated the number, hitting the room like a physical blow. 17 passengers subjected to discrimination while we looked the other way." Michael Chen, Director of Human Resources, pulled up additional files on his laptop. It gets worse. I found patterns across multiple gates. Madison Pierce wasn't an isolated case. She was part of a broader culture of appearance-based passenger profiling. Dr. Patricia Williams, Apex Airways' new Director of Diversity and Inclusion, leaned forward. I've been analyzing passenger complaint data using our new bias detection algorithms. We've found evidence of widespread discriminatory practices across 47 gates in 32 airports. The room fell silent as the magnitude of the problem sank in. How Roberto asked quietly, "Did this happen under our watch?" James Mitchell, VP of Airport Operations, cleared his throat nervously. Sir, gate agents have traditionally been given wide discretion in passenger management. Supervisors were incentivized to minimize complaints and maximize positive feedback from premium passengers, which created a system, Sarah Walsh added, where agents could discriminate as long as first-class passengers were happy and complaints from economy passengers were buried. Roberto Martinez stood and walked to the window overlooking the Phoenix tarmac. Outside, Apex Airways planes sat motionless, grounded by his emergency order until the discrimination review was complete. "How many flights are we talking about?" he asked. 437 aircraft grounded across North America, replied Operations Manager David Torres. Approximately 60,000 passengers affected. Cost estimate $2.7 million per hour. Cost estimate for a federal discrimination lawsuit, Roberto countered. Conservative estimate $50 to $100 million plus immeasurable reputational damage, Sarah Walsh replied immediately. Roberto turned back to the room. "Then we keep them grounded until we fix this. Every single plane stays on the ground until we can guarantee that no passenger will face what Dr. Hayes faced today." Dr. Williams opened her tablet and displayed real-time social media analytics. The story is spreading exponentially. #Apex discrimination has been tweeted 47,000 times in the last hour. Ashley Brooks' live stream has been viewed 2.3 million times. CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC are all preparing segments. "What's the sentiment analysis?" Roberto asked. 91% negative toward Apex Airways initially, but that's shifting as word spreads about our immediate response. Terminating Madison Pierce publicly and grounding the fleet for discrimination review is being seen as unprecedented corporate accountability. Michael Chen pulled up personnel files. "I've identified every employee in Madison Pierce's reporting structure. Her supervisor, Lisa Hoffman, who buried the complaints. Regional Manager Tom Stevens, who approved Hoffman's decisions. District Director Sandra Martinez, who signed off on the appearance standards policy that enabled discrimination. All terminated," Roberto said without hesitation. "Effective immediately." Sir James Mitchell said carefully, "That's an entire management chain." The operational disruption, Roberto interrupted, pales in comparison to the moral disruption we've allowed to fester. Fire them all. Promote from within, based on merit and demonstrated commitment to equality. Sarah Walsh made rapid notes. "I'm recommending immediate settlement discussions with all 17 passengers who filed complaints against Madison Pierce. Full compensation, public apology, and commitment to reform. Approved. What else?" Dr. Williams consulted her tablet. "I'm proposing mandatory bias training for all customer-facing employees, implementation of real-time discrimination monitoring systems, and creation of a passenger advocacy program. How quickly can we implement with full corporate backing and unlimited budget? 30 days for basic training, 60 days for technology implementation, 90 days for full cultural transformation." Roberto Martinez looked around the room at his senior leadership team. These were the people who would either save Apex Airways or preside over its destruction. "Ladies and gentlemen, what happened at Gate B47 today was a moral failure that starts with me. I created a culture where financial performance mattered more than human dignity. That culture nearly cost us our largest shareholder and definitely cost us our soul." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But crisis creates opportunity. We have the chance to become the first major airline to completely eliminate discrimination from our operations. To prove that corporate accountability is possible. To show the world that doing the right thing is also good business. The conference room door opened, and Roberto's assistant entered with urgent messages. "Sir, the Department of Transportation is requesting immediate conference call. The NAACP is demanding federal investigation." And she paused. Dr. Simone Hayes' assistant called. "She wants to schedule a meeting when Dr. Hayes returns from London." Roberto nodded grimly. "Set up all three. DOT gets priority, NAACP gets full cooperation, and Dr. Hayes gets whatever she wants whenever she wants it." As his leadership team dispersed to implement the most comprehensive corporate reform in airline history, Roberto Martinez remained in the conference room staring at the grounded planes visible through his window. In one morning, Apex Airways had gone from a successful regional carrier to a company fighting for its reputation, its federal operating licenses, and its survival. All because one gate agent had decided that a woman in a Howard University sweatshirt didn't belong in first class. The irony wasn't lost on Roberto. The woman they discriminated against owned more of the airline than anyone except the founding family. But more importantly, she was a human being who deserved dignity, respect, and basic courtesy. Values that Apex Airways was about to learn to prioritize above everything else. Elena Rodriguez had never boarded a passenger with her hands shaking before, but as she scanned Dr. Simone Hayes' boarding pass, her fingers trembled with a mixture of adrenaline relief and determination. Dr. Hayes Elena said softly, "I want you to know that watching you stand up for yourself today changed something in me. I've seen discrimination at these gates before, and I stayed silent because I was afraid. I won't stay silent anymore." Simone paused in the jet bridge entrance, studying the young woman's face. Elena Rodriguez couldn't have been more than 26 with kind eyes and the earnest demeanor of someone who still believed the world could be fair. "Elena, what Madison did today wasn't your fault, but what you do tomorrow is your choice. Use this promotion to make sure no passenger ever faces what I faced." "I promise," Elena said, and Simone could see she meant it. As Simone walked down the jet bridge toward Flight 447 behind her, the gate area continued to buzz with energy. Ashley Brooks was fielding interview requests from major news networks who had seen her live stream. Passengers were sharing their own stories of airport discrimination, creating an impromptu support group for anyone who had ever been judged by their appearance. Michael Sterling approached Elena's podium, his expensive suit rumpled and his confidence shaken. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "I wanted to apologize. Earlier, when I agreed with Madison's treatment of Dr. Hayes, I was wrong. I let my own biases cloud my judgment." Elena looked at him with new eyes. This was what change looked like, not just firing the obvious villains, but good people examining their own complicity in discrimination. "Mr. Sterling, apology accepted. But don't apologize to me. The next time you see someone being treated unfairly because of how they look, speak up then." Meanwhile, airport security was escorting Madison Pierce through the terminal toward the employee parking garage. The walk of shame was witnessed by hundreds of travelers, many of whom recognized her from the viral video already spreading across social media. Madison's perfect appearance had finally cracked completely. Her makeup streaked down her cheeks, her carefully styled hair hung in disheveled strands, and her designer blazer was wrinkled from stress sweat. She clutched her personal belongings in a cardboard box, her Apex Airways badge and security credentials already confiscated. "Mrs. Pierce," one of the security officers said as they reached the exit, "you're banned from all Apex Airways facilities. You're also being placed on the industry-wide security watch list. No major airline will hire you in any capacity." Madison looked back one last time at the terminal where she'd ruled for 15 years. Through the windows, she could see gate B47 where Elena Rodriguez was helping passengers with a kindness and respect Madison had never shown. Her phone buzzed with a text from her husband, Federal Judge Richard Pierce. Saw the news. "Don't come home tonight. My chambers are reviewing discrimination cases involving airline travel. Conflict of interest if you're here." Even her marriage was crumbling because of her prejudices. Aboard Flight 447, Captain Jennifer Walsh made an announcement that would be remembered long after the plane landed. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I want to address what happened at our gate today before departure." The cabin went silent. Passengers who had witnessed the discrimination, those who had only heard pieces of the story, and others who were learning about it for the first time, all listened intently. Apex Airways failed one of our passengers today. Dr. Simone Hayes was subjected to discrimination that has no place in aviation, in business, or in human interaction. As your captain, I want to personally apologize to Dr. Hayes and commit to all of you that this will never happen again on any flight I command. Spontaneous applause filled the cabin, but Captain Walsh wasn't finished. Dr. Hayes is traveling to London on a medical emergency to save her brother's life. Flight 447 will receive priority handling across the Atlantic. London Control has been notified, and we have medical ground transport waiting at Heathrow. In Seat 1. Simone closed her eyes briefly. The familiar weight of exhaustion pressed down on her, but now it was mixed with something else. A sense that justice, while painful to achieve, was possible. Her phone buzzed with a text from David in London, saw the news. "You didn't have to do all that for me." She typed back, "I didn't do it for you. I did it for everyone who comes after us." As Flight 447 taxied toward the runway, ground control at Denver International received an unusual request from Apex Airways dispatch. Denver ground. Apex 447 requesting priority departure for medical emergency passenger. Corporate directive from CEO. Apex 447 priority departure approved. You are cleared for immediate takeoff runway 34L. Safe travels. The plane lifted into the Colorado sky carrying Dr. Simone Hayes toward her brother's salvation. But it was also carrying something else, a story that would transform an industry, a reminder that dignity cannot be purchased, but must be given freely, and proof that one person's courage to speak truth to power could create ripples of change extending far beyond a single confrontation. As the Rocky Mountains disappeared beneath the clouds, Simone Hayes allowed herself to think beyond the immediate crisis. David would survive. She was certain of that. The kidney transplant would be successful, her brother would recover, and their medical technology company would continue saving lives around the world. But something else had been born at gate B47 that morning. A precedent. A line drawn in the sand. A declaration that discrimination, no matter how casual or culturally accepted, would no longer be tolerated. The flight attendants moved through the cabin with exceptional care, aware that every passenger was now watching how Apex Airways treated people. The woman in economy with the crying baby received extra assistance. The elderly man with mobility issues was helped with genuine kindness. The teenager traveling alone was checked on frequently. Word had spread through the airline's communication system. The world was watching. Every interaction, every gesture, every moment of service was now a reflection of whether Apex Airways truly meant its promises of change. Flight 447 crossed into international airspace carrying more than passengers to their destinations. It carried the hope that corporate accountability was possible, that widespread change could happen overnight when courage met consequence, and that basic human dignity was non-negotiable regardless of appearance, wealth, or status. Behind them, Apex Airways faced the most challenging transformation in its history. Ahead of them, London waited, with the surgeons' hospitals and the chance to save a life. But the most important rescue had already happened at Gate B47, where Dr. Simone Hayes had rescued not just her own dignity, but the possibility that travel could be fair, respectful, and equal for everyone. Flight 447 touched down at London Heathrow at 6:42 a.m. local time, 23 minutes ahead of schedule. Captain Walsh had pushed the aircraft through favorable winds and received priority routing across the Atlantic, shaving precious time from Dr. Simone Hayes' race against her brother's failing kidneys. As the plane taxied to the gate, Simone felt her phone vibrate with a message from Dr. James Cooper, the lead surgeon at St. Thomas Hospital. "David is stable and prepped for surgery. We're ready when you are." The cabin remained silent as Simone gathered her worn messenger bag. Flight attendants had ensured her priority deplaning, But something unexpected happened as she moved toward the exit. One by one, passengers began standing, not to retrieve their luggage, but to applaud. It started with Michael Sterling in 2B, the businessman who had supported Madison Pierce's discrimination before witnessing its consequences. His applause was joined by the woman with the designer dog carrier, then the elderly businessman, then everyone in first class. The applause spread to business class, then economy, until the entire aircraft resonated with the sound of people honoring someone who had stood up for dignity when it would have been easier to stay silent. Simone paused at the aircraft door, looking back at the passengers who had witnessed her humiliation and her vindication. "Thank you," she said simply. "But don't let this end here. The next time you see someone being discriminated against, remember this moment. Stand up, speak out, demand better." At the gate, 2 Metropolitan Police officers waited with a blue light escort car. Roberto Martinez had coordinated with British authorities to ensure Simone's immediate transport to St. Thomas Hospital. Dr. Hayes, the senior officer, asked, "This way, please. Traffic control has been cleared for emergency medical transport." The drive through London morning traffic was surreal. Police sirens wailed as they cut through the typically congested streets, other vehicles pulling aside to let them pass. Simone watched the city wake up through the cruiser windows, her mind already shifting from corporate justice to medical precision. David was dying, but she was here now. The discrimination at gate B47 was behind her. The surgery ahead would save her brother's life. St. Thomas Hospital appeared through the London mist like a beacon. Dr. Cooper met her at the emergency entrance, his surgical team already assembled. "Dr. Hayes, your brother's condition deteriorated overnight, but he's stable enough for surgery. We've been monitoring the compatibility markers from your medical records. This transplant has an excellent chance of success." As they walked rapidly through the hospital corridors toward the surgical unit, Dr. Cooper continued the briefing. "The procedure will take approximately 6 hours. You'll be under general anesthesia for 4 of those hours while we harvest your kidney. David's surgery begins simultaneously in the adjacent operating theater." They reached the preoperative area where David Hayes lay, connected to dialysis machines, his skin gray but his eyes bright with hope. "Simone," he whispered, reaching for her hand. "I saw the news about the airport. You didn't have to fight that battle for me." "I didn't fight it for you," Simone replied, echoing her earlier text. "I fought it because it was right. Because someone had to. Because staying silent makes you complicit." David squeezed her hand weakly. "Always the activist. Always the doctor," she corrected. "And doctors don't let their patients die if they can help it." The anesthesiologist began preparing Simone's IV line. As consciousness faded, her last thought was of Elena Rodriguez at gate B47, promising to use her promotion to ensure no passenger would ever face discrimination again. 6 hours later, Simone woke in recovery to the most beautiful sound in the world, Dr. Cooper's voice saying, "Both surgeries were successful. David's new kidney is functioning perfectly." The relief was overwhelming. David would live. The kidney that had developed in her body would continue sustaining life in his. Medical science sibling love and pure determination had triumphed over genetic disease. But as Simone lay in recovery, her phone buzzed with messages that reminded her the battle she'd fought at gate B47 was creating victories beyond her brother's survival. Elena Rodriguez had texted Dr. Hayes, "I wanted you to know. We've already implemented new passenger dignity protocols at DN. No more appearance-based judgments, ever." Ashley Brooks had sent a video message, "Dr. Hayes, my live stream has been viewed 4.8 million times. People are sharing their own discrimination stories and demanding change at airports worldwide. You started something amazing." Roberto Martinez had called 3 times, leaving voicemails about Apex Airways' transformation and requesting a meeting when she returned to discuss how to make the changes permanent and industry-wide. But the message that meant the most came from David's phone, sent by one of their Hayes Medical Technologies engineers. Dr. Hayes, the board voted unanimously to establish the Hayes Foundation for Travel Dignity, funded with $50 million from company profits. Your fight for respect is becoming a movement for justice. As evening fell over London, Dr. James Cooper delivered the final medical update. Your brother is awake, his kidney function is excellent, and his prognosis is completely positive. You saved his life. Dr. Hayes. Simone looked through the hospital window at the London skyline, thinking about the chain of events that had brought her here. Madison Pierce's discrimination had almost prevented this moment, but it had also exposed a pattern of bias that might have continued indefinitely if someone hadn't possessed the power to fight back. Dr. Cooper Simone said quietly, "I want to make sure every patient has the same chance we had today. No one should face barriers to life-saving treatment because of how they look or what they can afford. What are you thinking I'm thinking?" Simone replied that this kidney transplant was just the beginning. The medical victory was complete. David would survive and thrive. But the larger victory, the transformation of corporate culture, the exposure of embedded discrimination, the creation of accountability where none had existed before, that victory was still unfolding. And Dr. Simone Hayes, who had been told she didn't belong in first class because of her appearance, was about to return to America as one of the most powerful voices for dignity and justice in the travel industry. While Dr. Simone Hayes recovered in London, the discrimination she had endured at Gate B47 triggered the most comprehensive corporate transformation in airline industry history. Roberto Martinez hadn't slept in 48 hours. From his crisis command center at Apex Airways headquarters, he oversaw a complete restructuring of company culture policies and personnel that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. Status report Roberto called to his assembled leadership team, now expanded to include civil rights attorneys, diversity consultants, and federal compliance specialists. Sarah Walsh, chief legal officer, spoke first. All 17 passengers who filed complaints against Madison Pierce have accepted our settlement offers. Full financial compensation, public apology, and commitment to policy reform. No lawsuits pending. Dr. Patricia Williams, Director of Diversity and Inclusion, presented her implementation timeline. Mandatory bias training for all 12,000 customer-facing employees begins Monday. We've contracted with the NAACP ADL and SPLC to develop curriculum. Every gate agent, flight attendant, and customer service representative will complete 40 hours of training before returning to passenger contact. Michael Chen, HR Director, pulled up staffing changes. We've terminated 47 employees across the system for documented discrimination patterns. We're promoting from within based on demonstrated commitment to equality. Helena Rodriguez isn't the only junior employee getting fast-tracked for showing moral courage. Technology integration, Roberto asked. James Morrison, new VP of Passenger Experience, activated wall displays showing real-time monitoring systems. AI bias detection is operational at 32 major airports. Cameras and audio monitoring flag discriminatory language or behavior patterns. Any incident triggers immediate supervisor notification and corporate review. Federal Compliance Department of Transportation has concluded their investigation, Sarah Walsh reported. Our immediate response, comprehensive reforms, and cooperation with federal oversight earned us a clean restart. No fines, no license restrictions. They're actually citing us as the new industry standard for discrimination response. Roberto nodded grimly. What's the financial impact? CFO David Torres consulted his tablets. Initial costs $47 million for training technology implementation and settlements. Grounding the fleet cost $23 million in operational losses. But he paused, consulting additional data. Passenger bookings are up 18% since the incident. Customer satisfaction scores have improved across all demographics. Revenue projections show we'll recoup costs within 6 months. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Doing the right thing wasn't just morally correct, it was financially beneficial. Dr. Williams pulled up social media analytics. #Apex accountability has been shared 2.7 million times with 94% positive sentiment. Ashley Brooks's documentary about the incident has been viewed 12 million times. We've become the airline people choose specifically because of our discrimination response. Industry impact, Roberto asked. Sarah Walsh opened Federal Communications. Every major airline has contacted us requesting copies of our new policies. United is implementing similar bias detection systems. Delta has mandated appearance-neutral customer service training. American is establishing passenger advocacy programs. The entire industry is adopting our reforms. Because they're afraid of their own discrimination incidents going viral, Michael Chen added. Exactly, Roberto confirmed. Fear is a powerful motivator for corporate behavior change. Elena Rodriguez's voice crackled through the speakerphone from Denver International Airport. Mr. Martinez, I wanted to report on our gate operations since the new protocols launched. Go ahead, Elena. We've processed 15,000 passengers through gate B47 in the past week. 0 discrimination complaints. Customer satisfaction scores are the highest in the airport. But more importantly, we're treating everyone with dignity regardless of appearance, accent, or perceived status. Roberto smiled for the first time in days. That's exactly what we wanted to hear. How are the other gates responding? The attitude change is remarkable. Word spread quickly about what happened with Madison Pierce. No one wants to be the next person terminated for discrimination, but beyond fear, there's genuine commitment to doing better. Dr. Williams activated news feeds on the conference room monitors. Media coverage has been overwhelmingly positive. CNN featured us as a case study in corporate accountability. Harvard Business School wants to write a case study about rapid culture change. The NAACP has invited Roberto to speak at their national convention about airline industry reform. What about Madison Pierce? Roberto asked quietly. Unemployable in aviation, Sarah Walsh replied bluntly. Blacklisted by every major airline. She's filed unemployment claims, but workplace discrimination termination makes her ineligible. Her husband filed for divorce, citing professional conflict of interest with his federal judgeship. Roberto felt no satisfaction in Madison's destruction. Her discrimination had been inexcusable, but her complete downfall seemed proportional to the harm she'd caused, and the message it sent to others considering similar behavior. Status on the Hayes Foundation meeting, Roberto asked. Dr. Hayes returns from London tomorrow, his assistant reported. She's requested a full board meeting to discuss long-term discrimination prevention initiatives. She's also inviting Elena Rodriguez to participate as frontline staff perspective. Approved. Whatever, doctor. Hayes wants, she gets. She saved this company by forcing us to confront our failures. James Morrison pulled up passenger feedback data. Roberto, I want to read you something. This is from a passenger who flew with us yesterday. I'm a black businessman who has faced discrimination at airports my entire career. Yesterday, Apex Airways treated me with dignity and respect from check-in to arrival. For the first time in 20 years of business travel, I felt valued as a human being, not judged as a threat. This is my new airline for life. The room went quiet. This was why the transformation mattered, not just for corporate profits or federal compliance, but for the human dignity of every person who walked through their airports. Ladies and gentlemen, Roberto said, standing to address his leadership team, what we've accomplished in 1 week would typically take years to implement. We've proven that corporate culture can change rapidly when leadership demands it and employees embrace it. He paused, looking around the room at faces that had aged years in the past week. But this is just the beginning. Dr. Hayes forced us to see our failures. Now we have to ensure those failures never happen again, not just at Apex Airways, but throughout the travel industry. Dr. Williams consulted her calendar. The International Air Transport Association has requested a presentation on our discrimination prevention protocols. They want to implement similar standards globally. Accepted, Roberto said immediately. We're going to export this transformation worldwide. As the meeting dispersed, Roberto Martinez remained in the conference room looking at the monitors displaying real-time passenger satisfaction data, discrimination, complaint tracking, and employee compliance metrics. 1 week ago, Apex Airways had been a successful airline with a hidden discrimination problem. Today, they were the industry leader in passenger dignity and corporate accountability. Tomorrow, they would continue the work of ensuring that what happened to Dr. Simone Hayes would never happen to anyone else. The transformation was complete, but the mission was just beginning. 3 months later, Dr. Simone Hayes walked through Denver International Airport wearing the same faded Howard University sweatshirt and comfortable jeans that had triggered her discrimination at Gate B47. This time, however, she carried herself with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had fought injustice and won. Terminal B looked exactly the same, but everything had changed. Dr. Hayes' Elena Rodriguez called out as Simone approached the gate area. The young woman who had been promoted from junior agent to senior customer experience manager now wore her authority with the kind of confidence that comes from doing meaningful work. Elena Simone smiled warmly. "How are things running? See for yourself." Elena gestured toward Gate B47, where a steady stream of passengers moved through boarding with efficiency and respect. "We've processed over 200,000 passengers since that day. 0 discrimination complaints. But more importantly, 0 tolerance for bias in any form." At the gate podium, where Madison Pierce had once held court, a new agent helped an elderly passenger understand the boarding process with infinite patience. Nearby, another staff member assisted a family with young children, showing the kind of human kindness that made travel less stressful for everyone. The real test, Elena continued, came last month when a passenger tried to complain about a woman in traditional Muslim dress boarding first class. Our new protocol requires immediate education about religious tolerance and civil rights. If the passenger continues discriminatory behavior, they're removed from the flight. Simone nodded approvingly. And how did that situation resolve? The passenger apologized, asked to learn more about Islamic culture, and ended up having a 3-hour conversation with the Muslim woman during the flight. They exchanged contact information and are now friends. This was the transformation Simone had hoped for. Not just punishment for bias, but education that led to understanding. Dr. Hayes, Elena, said more quietly, "I wanted to thank you again. What you did that day didn't just change policies, it changed me. I speak up now when I see unfairness not just here but everywhere. You taught me that silence makes you complicit." As they talked, Ashley Brooks approached with her ever-present camera and the kind of nervous energy that comes from unexpected fame. Dr. Hayes Ashley called out, "I hope you don't mind, I was hoping to get an update for my documentary." Ashley's live stream of the discrimination incident had evolved into a full documentary about airport bias, corporate accountability, and the ripple effects of individual courage. The film had been accepted to Sundance and was being distributed by Netflix. "Ashley, how's the documentary progressing?" "It's incredible," Ashley said, her eyes bright with purpose. "We've documented policy changes at airports worldwide because of your stand at this gate. The International Air Transport Association has implemented the Hayes Protocol for discrimination prevention globally." The Hayes Protocol. Simone still felt a mixture of pride and responsibility when she heard her name attached to the industry-wide reform standards. But the most amazing part, Ashley continued, is the personal stories. "We've interviewed hundreds of travelers who faced discrimination but stayed silent because they felt powerless. Your story gave them permission to speak up to demand better treatment." Simone's flight to visit David in Atlanta was boarding, but she had one more stop to make. She walked to the memorial plaque that now hung near Gate B47, installed by Apex Airways to commemorate the transformation. The plaque read, "In recognition of Dr. Simone Hayes, whose courage in the face of discrimination sparked industry-wide reform. May every traveler who passes this gate remember that dignity is not a privilege to be earned, but a right to be honored." Below the plaque, a suggestion box invited passengers to report bias incidents with a guarantee of 24-hour corporate response. Dr. Hayes Elena said as they walked toward the boarding area, "Roberto Martinez asked me to give you this." She handed Simone an envelope marked with the Apex Airways CEO seal. Inside was a handwritten letter, "Dr. Hayes. 3 months ago, you saved more than your brother's life. You saved this company's soul. The discrimination you endured exposed failures we didn't even know existed. Your response showed us that corporate accountability isn't just possible, it's essential. Today, Apex Airways leads the industry in passenger satisfaction across all demographic groups." We've become the airline people choose specifically because we treat everyone with dignity. More importantly, your story has inspired reform across the entire travel industry. The Hayes Protocol is now international standard for discrimination prevention. But I know none of that matters to you as much as this David's recovery is complete. Your medical technology company continues saving lives, and no passenger at our gates will ever face what you faced again. Thank you for forcing us to be better. Roberto Martinez, CEO Simone, folded the letter carefully. Corporate apologies were nice, but the real measure of change was in the daily experiences of ordinary travelers who would never be discriminated against because someone had fought back when it mattered. Boarding announcement for Flight 1247 to Atlanta came over the PA system. We welcome all passengers regardless of appearance, background, or perceived status. Mutual respect makes for better flights. The announcement drew smiles from passengers who recognized the deliberate emphasis on equality. As Simone boarded the plane, she passed the first-class section where Michael Sterling sat in his usual seat. He looked up and nodded respectfully. "Dr. Hayes," he said quietly, "I've been following the changes across the industry. What you accomplished, it's remarkable." "What we accomplished," Simone corrected. "Change requires witnesses willing to learn from their mistakes." Sterling nodded thoughtfully. "I've been volunteering with the airport's new passenger advocacy program, helping travelers who face discrimination, trying to make up for the times I stayed silent. This was perhaps the most meaningful transformation of all. Not just policy changes, but people examining their own complicity and choosing to become allies rather than bystanders." Simone found her seat in first class but chose to sit in economy instead. She wanted to experience travel as most people did to ensure that dignity wasn't reserved for those who could afford premium treatment. The flight attendant, a young man named Carlos, noticed her seat change. "Ma'am, your assigned seat is in first class. Would you like me to escort you there? I'm exactly where I want to be," Simone replied. "How's the service in economy these days?" Carlos smiled with genuine warmth. "The same as first class, just different seats. We treat everyone as valued passengers. That's the Apex Airways way now." As Flight 1247 taxied toward the runway, Simone looked out the window at Gate B47, where Elena Rodriguez was helping another group of passengers board their flight with efficiency and respect. 3 months ago, that gate had been the site of discrimination that almost prevented a life-saving kidney transplant. Today, it was a symbol of corporate accountability and human dignity. The plane lifted into the Colorado sky, carrying Simone toward a reunion with David, whose recovery had been complete and whose gratitude remained overwhelming. But more importantly, it carried the knowledge that widespread change was possible when individuals refused to accept injustice as inevitable. Dr. Simone Hayes had been told she didn't belong in first class because of her appearance. Instead, she had helped create a world where everyone belonged everywhere, treated with dignity, regardless of how they looked, where they came from, or what others assumed about their worth. The ripples from Gate B47 continued spreading, touching every airport, every airline, and every traveler who would never face discrimination, because someone had stood up when standing up mattered most. Justice, it turned out, was the best frequent flyer program of all. If this story moved you, if you've ever been judged for your appearance, or if you believe everyone deserves respect regardless of how they look, please share this video with your friends and family. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss stories like this one. Drop a comment below telling me about a time when you witnessed discrimination, or when someone stood up for what was right. Your stories matter, and they remind us that change is possible when good people refuse to stay silent. And remember, the next time you witness discrimination anywhere, you have a choice. You can stay silent and let injustice continue, or you can speak up and create change. Dr. Simone Hayes chose to fight back when it would have been easier to stay quiet. Her courage transformed an entire industry and saved countless future travelers from facing the same humiliation. Your voice matters too. Use it, like this video, if it inspired you. Subscribe for more true stories of justice and courage, and share this everywhere because everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.